Back in February, literally the day after my Trump rally article came out, I published this piece on Forbes, The Dark Side of the Me Too Movement, What Happens When Men Are Falsely Accused. Now, the proximity to my Trump rally article was purely coincidental. It was not a planned thing. Some people call it a companion piece. It was not a companion piece. I actually had the idea to write this one first. I worked on this article for weeks. This was one I actually put a lot of effort into. The Trump rally article, I wrote in about 20 minutes. I didn't even proofread it before I posted it on Medium. It was a completely different thing, and it just happened to start going viral at the same time that this article about the Me Too movement went live. Now, this has been something that, as an organizational psychologist, I have actually been worried about for a while. I've worked with many clients who have been what I think is falsely accused, or at least had accusations greatly exaggerated about them in their offices. I've helped HR professionals do these types of investigations, and I've coached people through getting accused of sexual harassment at work. And, in most times when someone reports allegations of sexual harassment and assault at work, it does turn out to be true. However, in about 2 to 10% of cases, it turns out that the allegations are false. And what happens when those allegations are false? What happens to the men involved? Their lives get destroyed. Their careers get destroyed. Everyone looks at them differently. Everyone sees them in a different way. And just because it only happens 2 to 10% of the time does not make it acceptable. And so I wrote this article, and listen, I actually thought that of the two articles, of the Trump rally article or this one, that I was going to get a lot of heat for this one. In fact, I had been bracing myself for the heat that I was going to get for this. And it just so happened, because there was so much going on with the Trump rally article, I did get heat for this. I did actually get a lot of blowback from this, but it was really, in comparison to the insanity of, the other article getting like 3 million views in a week, it was nothing. What I experienced from this was nothing compared to what I experienced from the other one. But it is important to me because, I start off this article with a very personal story, and I'm just going to read it to you, and we're going to go from there. When I was a young professional, I was raped by a coworker, and no one believed me. I share this brutal piece of information because over a decade later, when the Me Too movement happened, I was completely in favor of it. I was horrified at the number of stories that were being shared, but simultaneously thrilled that those stories were seeing the light of day as victims took their power back. A year after the movement started, I mustered the courage to share my story publicly for the first time since it happened, though clearly I didn't understand how a hashtag worked at the time. We'll talk about that in a sec. For me, it transformed my experience with what happened into something more empowering rather than something was debilitating. And this was the tweet that I sent. And to provide context, you don't see the Me Too hashtag in this tweet because it was happening at a time when people were just sharing their stories. They weren't necessarily always using the hashtag. And so I hadn't associated the two in my head, I don't think, but this was the story I shared. In my first job out of college, I was raped by a coworker. And when I eventually blurted it out at work months later to my boss, my vice president, and the head of human resources, they did nothing. And what's more, I didn't think there was anything strange about it. I expected them to do nothing. And I share this story at the start of this article about the dark side of the Me Too movement simply because I want people to understand that this is not a game for me. This video in particular is not a gotcha moment. This is something that I actually believe is important. I believe it is important for workplaces to fully investigate claims of harassment and assault every single time they are made, every single time, without exception. I'm not going to go into what I had to do to process what happened to me, to deal with what happened to me, and also to deal with the fact that, I had a boss and a vice president, both of whom were women, and they didn't care. They didn't care. When I said I was raped by a coworker, they did not care. They did nothing. And I don't want that to happen to anyone. I want everyone to be able to come forward. I want everyone to be taken seriously. So we're not going to read this full article, but I would encourage you absolutely to go through and read it, because I have interviews with Alan Dershowitz, who is in the midst of a Me Too battle right now. He has been for years. His story is amazing. I actually just learned on Twitter, he just tweeted that a book he wrote about it called Guilt by Accusation, The Challenge of Proving Innocence in the Age of Me Too. He actually convinced his publisher to make that book free on Kindle for right now, and I strongly recommend you go and check it out if you're interested in his case, because it lays it all out very, very clearly. And what's so interesting about Alan's case is that it spans before the Me Too movement started and after the Me Too movement started. So he's actually seen it from both angles. I also tell the story of another character, Mike Tunison. Mike is just like an average dude. Average dude. And then one day he got anonymously accused of a Me Too infraction in a spreadsheet in a Google Doc. With it totally anonymous. He to this day doesn't know who made the accusation, but it wreaked havoc on his life in unimaginable ways. He actually found out about it. He was put on the shitty media men's list, and his girlfriend found out about it at the time, and she was like, "What's this, Mike?" And he was anonymously accused. To this day, has no idea who accused him and denies the allegations, and hasn't even been able to make any headway in figuring out if anyone ever made an official report or any of that. His story's crazy, but I'll link this article in the description below so that you can find it, and I would encourage you to read it, because listen, man, the interesting thing about this article, actually I'll scroll down to this one thing that happened. So I say, we need to balance out the conversation around Me Too. If a person is correctly accused of harassment or assault towards a colleague, and those allegations are proven to be valid following an investigation, then it is fair game for them to suffer consequences for their actions that are proportional to what they did. But we are not talking about the flip side of the equation and the impact it can have on real lives when the allegations are not true, but are presumed to be by organizational leaders and or colleagues that might have been accused. In fact, some might argue that we're not even supposed to think about what might happen if these allegations are false. When I began researching for this article, I was discouraged from even considering writing about the experiences of men who have been falsely accused. When I posted on my website that I was looking for sources to talk to, I received many responses like this. So I posted on a website called Help a Reporter Out, looking for sources, and this was actually an example of not an insignificant amount of responses that I received to, like, not just through that website, but like also just kind of like asking around. This is what this person said. Stories like this enable users to create a dangerous argument that they're being falsely accused when it's very, very unlikely. You're putting survivors and victims in danger with stories like this. Again, I am a victim. And I will at the same time say that every allegation needs to be investigated, because no one should have their lives ruined because of something they didn't do. And just to put some numbers to this, folks, listen, according to the EEOC, there are 7,014 charges of sex-based harassment filed in 2019. At the low end of the spectrum, if we say just 2% are false, that's 150 people. 150 people, mostly men, that are falsely accused and have to deal with the consequences of that. If we go up to 10%, which is the high end of what they think false allegations are, then we're looking at 750 people. 750 people who could have their lives ruined, who could have their careers destroyed, who could, have their marriages destroyed over a false accusation. It is important that we discuss these stories. And that's why it's important to me that movements like the Me Too movement are actually taken seriously, Alyssa Milano. Listen, girl, I got a bone to pick with you, man. I had a bone to pick with you, because if we only apply our standards when it's convenient, then they are not standards at all. I oftentimes think that the fight over things like this, it's not really about people who believe in solving the problem and people who don't think there's any problem at all. It's between people who genuinely, authentically want to solve the problem, and I would put myself in that category, and people like Alyssa Milano who are using a cause and not acting in good faith to play politics with the situation, because it's those people that are acting in bad faith that actually do more to harm movements like this than people who don't believe in interacting with it at all. I would take the people who fundamentally disagree with the Me Too movement. I would take those people and work to convince them and work to bring them around and work with them to get them to understand the impact every single day over people who are not acting in good faith. So Alyssa Milano, yesterday, I believe this came out, and this is from Fox News. Alyssa Milano explains silence on Joe Biden sexual assault allegations, says men deserve due process. Oh, really, Alyssa Milano? Oh, really? I seem to recall you sitting in the Kavanaugh hearing, looking with your best distressed face in full view of the camera the entire time, basically making it very clear that you thought the guy was guilty. Let's see. Alyssa Milano is defending her position to stay silent in the wake of recently surfaced allegations against former President Joe Biden by former Senate staffer Tara Reade, who claims he sexually assaulted her in 1993. Now, I want to be very clear. I don't like allegations that come up from 10, 20, almost 30 years ago. I don't like that. I think that's not cool to me, and it brings up so many questions about why they weren't brought up sooner. I can understand a little bit of a delay. Listen, when I was raped, it took me months to speak up, so I understand a little bit of a delay, and I was terrified no one would believe me. That's why I didn't speak up, man. But 30 years coming in when the guy is running for president, that seems like a little fishy to me. And it's always conveniently when these guys are going into like public office too. So there should be an investigation. I actually agree with that point that yes, we should follow due process. But coming from Alyssa Milano, this is disingenuous at best. And it's the disingenuousness that hurts the entire movement. Milano, 47, spoke with radio host Randy Cohen on Monday during his Sirius XM broadcast when Cohen brought up the fact that once again, Milano had been a trending topic on Twitter. He gave the actress the floor to speak on the matter, and she did so, choosing her words gingerly. So it's actually quite a serious reason, I think. So I endorsed Joe Biden. And there have been accusations against Joe about sexual assault, Milano began. I have not publicly said anything about this. The Charmed Star alum famously attended Supreme Court Brett Kavanaugh's Senate Judiciary Committee hearing on Capitol Hill in 2018 when Christine Blasey Ford testified that he sexually assaulted her in the early 1980s. She said has always been, you got a copy edit at this Fox News, and I'm the typo queen of the universe, and I'm saying that. She said has always taken a wait-and-see approach to these sensitive matters, and the predicament with Biden has found herself in. No, she hasn't taken a wait-and-see attitude. No, she hasn't, because she did not take a wait-and-see attitude with Brett Kavanaugh. And listen, man, I wanted Brett Kavanaugh to be investigated. Full disclosure, I wanted more thorough investigations than what happened there, and I think that was owed simply because of the position that he was going for. However, I don't think the presumption of guilt comes simply because we don't have exactly the investigations that we want to have. She explained to Cohen, if you remember, it kind of took me a long time to publicly say anything about Harvey as well, because I believe that even though we should believe women and it's an important thing, and what that statement really means is for so long, the go-to has been not to believe them. So really, we have to sort of societally change that mindset of believing women. I don't believe that believing all women should be the standard. I think taking allegations seriously should be the standard. Committing to investigating allegations should be the standard. Investigating allegations fully with competent professionals who know what they're doing, that should be the standard. Not believe all women, because women lie, man. They're human beings. They do. And again, we're talking about 2% to 10% of all accusations are false. That's a big range, but it is still there, right? 2 to 10%. That's not to say that all women lie. They don't. The majority of them are telling the truth. The majority of them are doing an incredibly vulnerable thing by coming forward. But we should still be, we need to be taking every accusation seriously, and the presumption has always got to be that people are innocent until proven guilty. But that does not mean at the expense of, giving men their due process and investigating situations and giving, it's got to be fair in both directions. How convenient that she says this now. Though Milano has been among many women in Hollywood on the front lines during the Me Too and Time's Up movements, they have been swept over various industries over the last 3 years. The social activist said her support of Biden mostly stems from her long-standing relationship with the presidential hopeful. In addition, Time's Up, the organization established in the thick of the Me Too movement to help survivors tell stories and fund court cases by accusers, determined allegations against Biden weren't sufficient to move forward with the investigation. So to be clear, the person accusing Biden went to Time's Up and they said, no, we're not touching this. Do you think, let's just pause it. If Biden was a Republican, do you think they would have taken on this case? I'm going to guess yes, because it's not about the principle. It's not about protecting women. It's not about believing women. It's not about supporting women. It's about using it to get to your desired political end. That's all this is about. So I've been very vocal about Biden and my support for him. I've known him for a long time, Milano said, and I do my due diligence because part of it was that, and the article that sort of stood out to me was that Time's Up decided not to take the case. So, she reminds me of like AOC's insane Instagram live stream the other day where AOC was like, oh, come on, man. You read an article and you consider that to be due diligence? Please, dude, have the courage of your GD convictions, because women like me have actually suffered at the hands of issues like this. And people like you diminish the claims that people like me are making, and it's not acceptable. It's absolutely not. And you know what pisses me off most of this whole thing? Is Alyssa Milano has forced me into a position of agreeing with all people Rose McGowan, who I think is crazy. As a general rule, I think she's absolutely insane. She said, "You're a fraud," to Alyssa Milano. "This is about holding the media accountable. You go after Trump and Kavanaugh saying believe victims. You are a lie. You have always been a lie. The corrupt DNC is in on the smear job of Tara Reade, and so are you. Shame." Rose McGowan's right. She's absolutely right. If Joe Biden was a Republican, this would be a completely different scenario right now. And I strongly believe that principles only mean something when you stick by them, when they're inconvenient. That is the only time principles mean anything. It is easy to stand by principles when they're convenient and when they support what you want. It is much more difficult. And this is what makes me so mad about like people on Twitter, honestly, because they're so like Twitter is crazy anyway. Like don't ever take anything seriously that happens on Twitter. But like people are so quick to dismiss their principles for the sake of political convenience and political expediency. Principles only mean something when you stick by them when they're inconvenient. Take a principled stance. Alyssa Milano is obviously not taking a principled stance. Time's Up is obviously not taking a principled stance. And it does not support the goals of the Me Too movement, which should be to reduce or eliminate sexual harassment, sexual assault, all those things in the workplace, in real life, wherever. That's the goal. And when people like Alyssa Milano are actively acting in the best interest of their political motivations rather than their principled stances, that's when the whole thing falls apart. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with the Me Too movement after this. I actually hope it leads to some semblance of getting back to where we should be. And I'll just end this with this quote by Alan Dershowitz, because actually, no, I'm not going to do that one. I'm going to do a different one. Oh, here it is. Okay. Generally, movements have a pendulum swing, and the pendulum has now swung in the direction of everyone's guilty, and don't you dare assert your innocence. We've got to swing the pendulum back. That is my best hope for what can happen out of this Me Too debacle, is that the pendulum swings back so that people are presumed innocent until they're guilty, and that doesn't matter based on your politics. It doesn't matter based on who you vote for. It is simply that we take women seriously, we review their allegations, we make sure we do it expediently, and we do it thoroughly, so that if there is a there, then the man or the perpetrator, because it's not always men, the perpetrator faces consequences, and the woman, or the victim rather, is protected. Because again, victims are not always women, perpetrators are not always men. It's very easy to speak in generalities on that. But we need to be presuming people's innocence, and we need to be taking principled stances on this. So listen guys, if you enjoyed this video, couple quick things. I have finally launched my Subscribestar. A lot of people have been asking for that. If you want to go ahead and support what I'm doing, there are a couple ways you can do it. First off, you don't have to give financially. You really don't, and I especially don't want you to if you are struggling right now or you're nervous. Please don't do that. If you want to there are other ways you can support me, like subscribing to this channel, giving it a thumbs up, sharing the video, things like that. But if you do want to support me financially, there are many different levels with many different perks that you can support me at. And listen, if I can get to $2,000 a month in subscribers on Subscribestar, then I'm going to put together a podcast that so many of you have asked me for. So podcasts take time, they take money. I have a day job. I know it doesn't seem like it right now because things are slow and things are a little weird, but I do actually in real life have a day job that I use to pay my mortgage and my bills. And if I'm going to take time away from my day job, then I need to make sure the thing I'm dedicating it to can be financially viable. So a little challenge there. We can work up to it. I actually don't think it's going to take very long. I think you guys are going to show up. But please, if you feel like you want to support my work, you want to see more of this content coming, go ahead and support me in whatever way you can.